Hey guys, welcome. My name is James. I'm from the Nerdy Bible, and with me tonight is Mike from Showboys. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How are
Yeah,
you? It's been
good.
it's been a couple weeks.
It has been a while. We're continuing. We're almost to the end of our series on The
Mhm.
Chosen, so that's pretty exciting.
I
It's been
know
so
it's
long that we've talked. I forgot, what we were doing.
yeah. So it's been there's been 2 weeks in between episode 6 and episode
Hmm.
7 of The
Yeah.
Chosen in their release schedule. And yeah, so we haven't recorded in 2 weeks. And like you said, the end is coming because tonight is Monday. We're recording on the 6th. And the finale releases tomorrow on the 7th, and then we're going to record next Monday. Uh, and then we're going to finally be completely caught up with The Chosen. And
Yeah.
it's crazy because we started in like August and it's February.
Yep. February, 42,000 hours of
Yeah,
recording,
only roughly.
24 something episodes. And, you know, so that's about
Yeah,
I
about
don't know, 80
about
hours. I don't
an
know. I
episode.
don't even know the
Yes,
numbers I
roughly.
said. It's thousands per episode. But yeah, so we've been talking a year straight
Yes.
for for 24
Yeah, if
episodes.
you
But yeah,
break out the amount of minutes
yeah.
for our entire series here, it's probably been about a year.
Yep, pretty much. So, yeah, dude, it's insane. So we're on episodes. It feels crazy too because at first we were like, "How are we ever going to get caught up with the show?" And it's like it's here. We're
Yeah.
caught up. We
And
caught
we
up.
almost
Yesterday was episode 7. Like
yeah,
the
and
world saw.
it almost like worked out to where we got through seasons 1 and 2, like we were 2 episodes away from
Mhm.
like perfectly lining it up to where we
We're
would finish recording and then the next week season 3 would start. We were so close.
Yeah, were we caught up last episode? I can't remember. It were like
Yeah.
did we okay, I think that was when we finally caught up last
Mhm.
episode. So yeah, we're here and it feels odd to be caught up.
Yeah.
So super cool. So what
In
are
the
we ever
2
gonna do after this? I mean, this
right.
is
I don't know. Nothing. I'm retiring from podcasting.
yeah.
No, this has been good. We have something in the works. We're gonna do another series on things.
Yeah.
And
Is
we'll
that your big tease right there?
yeah, big tease.
We're gonna do a series on some
Things will
things in
happen
the next.
still.
Yeah.
So tune in next
Actually,
week and we'll release some actual details, but
yeah. So stay tuned next week for some exciting news
mhm,
on what's
mhm.
coming next because um and then we're not even going to skip a beat either. Well, you just released everything like just me, I'm
Yeah.
still tomorrow. So I had this whole time travel thing. So by the time you're listening to this, it'll have been a week from yes, a week from when we actually recorded it. So um 3 weeks from now. Yeah, just stay tuned next week, 2 weeks from now. I don't know. I'm lost in time right now, as you can tell. Just, just
Yes.
stay tuned because we got some exciting news coming
Yeah.
your way.
Yeah. And in this catch up time, like I've been talking, I think maybe I have, I don't remember. Um, but I had been going back through the four gospels. Um, and I finally finished. I finished John last week. It's my last book, and I think John's my favorite out of the four. I just like the way it's written, the style.
Very
It's
poetic.
nice, yes. Um, and I decided to go on an Old Testament adventure and just start back all the way back at the beginning, go through Genesis,
In the beginning,
and
yeah.
yeah, in the beginning, back at the beginning, in the beginning. And what I was about to tell you before we started recording was for the longest time, I'm talking like a decade probably, I really struggled to like read my Bible and get anything out of it, or uh, also just be interested in reading the Bible. Like there was no draw. It was um I don't know. I just wasn't interested because it was a hard read.
Mhm.
Because you really need to understand the context,
Yep.
culturally and all that stuff to like really fully understand what's being you know written.
Mhm.
Um, and so every time I'd read, I'd just feel like I just don't. I mean, it's not. I'm just not getting it. So I would never be interested. And so like I prayed for a long time, just like, man, just help me want to read the Bible because like this sounds so dumb and so bad for someone who is in a position of
No.
leadership at churches for a long time. Um, but it was a big struggle. But for some reason, I mean, not for some reason, The Chosen had a big part in me getting back into wanting to read the Bible because of the way they present the Gospels. I'm like, oh, okay. They like do a good job of like we've talked about like paying attention to the historical, cultural like details of things. And so having that and seeing it like the conversations happening in real time with real people helped understand maybe tones of things that were said
Mhm.
in the gospels and whatnot. So that like really got me going. And then like as I did that, it became interesting and I started to understand things. But the whole reason I'm going into this, uh, Genesis freaking rules. Like it is so gnarly. And like I am genuinely excited every night to crack open Genesis and read it because like okay, this might sound weird, but there's some like fantastical stuff. Like they're talking about the huge cherubim like guarding the tree of life with like this crazy zigzagged flamed sword, like not letting Adam and Eve near it. And it's just like, I think sometimes I did this for a long time. Like you forget like some of the gnarly stuff,
Uh-huh.
like
That
in the Bible, like the angels are crazy, dude. Like some of the angels are really crazy. And it's just like, I don't know. It could be like it's as I don't want to say entertaining because that feels gross, but it's as like intriguing as like Lord of the Rings, right? You got like these crazy like angels are nuts. Like there's some pretty gnarly angels, and just like I don't know. There
no,
it's
yeah,
just a lot of really crazy things. And it I say all this to just say like it's really cool that my prayer was answered. It was like a decade after I was asking about all this, but hey,
now you're
it's
reading it like
there. It's
Tolkien.
there. Yeah. I'm like,
No, it it Genesis, the intro, the beginning is pretty interesting because it kind of falls in line with how a lot of other like mythology is written, and you can kind of see that kind of the way it's kind of written, that you can kind of compare it to those types of things and how it kind of is presented. I don't know, that's what it kind of reminds me of when I read it. It reminds me of like I'm reading some like um people are probably like heresy right now, but like it reminds me of like, like it like when I'm reading some any of the other ancient mythology, it's like this, it's like that first book, that
mhm,
it's like you could tell a lot of it's kind of been carried on verbally through it just has that kind of, I don't know, feel to it. And so, which you're right, when you have the cherubim
yeah,
going,
dude.
it's like, how do you not see it? That, I don't know, but it's interesting, man. Yeah. And it starts to get, you go into like Cain and Abel, and then leading into eventually Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and
Mhm,
Joseph, and you kind of get to this like this transition, and that's when it kind of starts to become normalized, and you're like, oh, like that's the humans I know, like enslavement and
yeah, there we go.
murder, and like well, you get to that pretty, once you get to Cain and Abel, you get
Mhm,
to that thing, but like, you start to feel like you can actually like start connecting to it. I don't know. That's when I started feeling it. Abraham, like the first patriarchs, you kind of get that. You know what I mean?
mhm,
That makes
mhm.
sense. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. I'm actually I'm I'm not really a big like read a Bible in a year plan, but some friends were doing it, and and invited me along on the Bible app, and I was like, I've never actually from start to finish read everything in fruition, and like I'm I feel like even now, especially in seminary, like it's like, I just finished up Mark last week, and like we did a huge dive into Mark. And
Hmm.
it's like I keep on doing these things and I want to see it in this larger picture. So it's
Yeah.
been pretty fun to do that. And I'm actually just finishing up Exodus now. So we did
Nice.
Genesis, Job, and
We're
finishing up Exodus. So
we're unintentionally
yeah,
going on an
it's
Old
pretty cool.
Testament adventure together.
Uh-huh. Absolutely. So, yeah,
That's
no,
awesome.
but you get in it's crazy though, because like
It
you get in
is.
these things and you're like, I can't reconcile that with my understanding of like, so like there's some things that I can we won't get into now, but like just yeah, it's wicked.
Mhm.
Like it's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Um
And then there's one thing I texted you about last night during the episode, that
yeah,
I wanted to talk about before we get into the episode.
let's do it.
Um, so my wife and I, had we turned the stream on, Angel Studios app, usually like 5 or so minutes before it starts, just so it's on, when we settle down. And they have these like, the pay it forward videos. Are you familiar with that? Do you ever have it on before the episode actually starts?
If my child allows me.
Right, right, right.
But
So
usually
basically, they have these things playing. They're called. I'm pretty sure they're the pay it forward videos, which I think are videos people send in when they, uh, make a donation or something, which is cool. A lot of them are like testimonies and stuff, which is awesome. Um, but a lot of them are starting to like creep into this very like weird territory, in my opinion. And my wife and I were talking about it, and it's just like it's starting to become just a tad concerning. And I wanted to run it by you. So there's been several. Like I don't have any of the videos like transcribed in front of me. But the main gist, paraphrasing, there are a lot of these videos that are attributing their freedom from XYZ, their I don't know. I don't. I can't think of the correct word, but attributing all the things that Jesus is doing in their lives to Dallas and the Chosen. Like, oh, I can't. If it wasn't for the Chosen, I wouldn't have been here, or I wouldn't have done this, or the Chosen is keeping me going. Dallas is amazing, and the Chosen is changing the world, and like, yes, all those things are true, but it's almost like these people are propping up this show
mhm,
like to where Jesus should be, and kind of getting on that fringe of almost like idolizing
mhm.
Dallas and the Chosen. Um, but if you've never seen these videos and aren't sure what I'm talking about, I don't expect you to like make a comment on it or anything. But it was just something weird that we noticed. We're like, this does this sound a little weird to you? Like, and then
Yeah, I
the
have it actually. I have it, have a couple of those playing right now because I was curious because I caught onto the live stream a little too late, um,
yeah, if you like,
and I missed it.
if you catch it next week or like go back and watch a few, they're not all like that, and I don't think they're like really in there's no intent, right? It's just like it's borderlining this weird territory that could get a little dangerous, I think.
Yeah, it
And it's
is.
like and it's I was Beck and I were talking because she's like, "That's kinda weird," like, it I was like, "Well, okay, it's not Dallas's fault, right?"
Mhm,
Like, Dallas is presenting Jesus to people, a lot of which probably don't have a relationship or like know of Jesus, right? So this is good. We're introducing the world to Jesus, right, in a relatable way. It's like that's all he can do. Like he can't shepherd the millions of people that watch this show, right? That's just not possible.
And it's
That's up
not,
to the
yeah,
person
yeah,
and their local church and their pastors and whatnot.
exactly.
And she's like, yeah, that's true. But like, do they need to play these that borderline like prop Dallas and the Chosen up to that level? You know, they do have control of that. And I was like, oh, that's a good point. I don't know what to say to that. But anyways, I don't know. It's just a thing to throw out there. I don't know what you guys think. Let me know. Write a comment. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you do anything and it's so easy to, border that idea of idolatry. I
Mhm.
mean, it's it happens without you even recognizing it, and not to even be like religious about it. I mean, idolatry is like it's you don't need to be religious to understand why it is not beneficial for you, right? Like if you idolize money, like you don't have to be religious to
Right.
understand that idolizing money is
Yeah.
not going to bring you happiness in life. Like, sorry
Right.
guys, like I don't know, like that is not what's going to do it. And
Mhm.
and so like it's any idea is of about idolatry is difficult with it. And it's like, you know, it I don't know. It's weird. I think that sometimes when I watch this and I can almost picture I don't know if this is bad, but I can picture some of like the personalities that like would take it to that level of like people, just the people that I've observed over the years in life, and just I'm a quiet people watcher. I know I'm on a podcast right now, and I'm forced to talk
Right.
to my friend Mike here, but like usually in like real life, I'm usually the quiet one in the room and paying
Same.
attention, and
Big
so
same.
I can picture those personalities that are like that are that would take this to that next level. And it's so easy. And like it is very important. So I guess what you to kind of put this into perspective, you made a really good point. It's not Dallas Jenkins' job to shepherd them.
Mhm.
And if you even talk to some of the great theologians that I've listened to and heard, and they'd say like the first thing that they would say is like, hey, like I can't be your pastor. You I'm like
Yeah.
I'm so like you need to go get plugged into a local
That's
church.
what the
So
local church is
I,
for.
I guess what I would say where I'm going with this is that if there is anything that's on them, and I do see posts and they kind of push people to kind of like um to get to not to read your Bible. I've seen that. Like they're like, hey, like this is just
Yeah.
why can't I think
A
of the word here?
tool.
A
This is not
tool
a
or a
replacement.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
But maybe you're right. Maybe it is something that could probably done more on the chosen. Like, hey, now that you've done this, what is your next steps?
Right.
How about go get plugged into a local church and actually be pastored? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like,
And by the
and
way, like we're not doing this. Like all this, like Jesus does all this stuff. We're just
yeah,
showing you what Jesus
exactly.
does.
And I think they do a pretty good job at that, but maybe you're right. Maybe the fact is that maybe they don't do a really good job at saying like, hey, like what you have done is you've opened up a book that you can't close now or whatever,
Mhm.
you've seen something you can't see. Like, hey, like you should probably like this isn't everything that you can learn about it. This isn't what you build your foundation on. This is to
Yeah.
open you up and open you up to the idea of it. Like you need to dig in, you need to do the work
Yeah.
yourself. And
Right.
that's why like I've made like the nerdy Bible and stuff is to in to kind of push people to be like, hey, like, just becoming Christian isn't enough. Like you need to
Mhm.
in a little bit more. You need to
Yeah.
wrestle with things. You have to realize that like this isn't this like very easy cut and dry thing. Like you need to wrestle or else you're going to struggle. It's like those people that like you see that are like they grew up Christian, they go through everything, they never really challenge it, they never really question it, and then it's like 40s, 50s, and they're like, having this like this midlife crisis with it, or existential crisis, and they're like struggling with their faith now because they haven't wrestled with it. You need to wrestle with it. So
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. I would say they need to probably be a little bit better at saying like, hey, go get plugged in with your church. And maybe I'm missing something. Maybe they do that, but
Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
Well, it's
So,
like,
yeah,
not to take up like the first 20 minutes, not even talking about the episode, but we're going to do it because this is a good conversation.
it is, and it's
Um,
important.
Okay, so we're in a very peculiar position anyways with the source material and the medium of which this is being told, right? Okay, so this is entertainment. This is a show. This is ultimately a business, right? Yes, they
Mhm.
are doing a form of ministry by telling the world of Jesus and presenting the gospels to the world, but also like to do that they need to make money so they can produce this stuff. And this is not a documentary. This is a dramatization of the life
Mhm.
of Jesus. So, like, couple that with the um, just hotbed of source material. Like, we're not we're dramatizing the word of God, which is like a tricky thing to do, right?
Mhm.
Because obviously you want to be reverent and as true as you can, but you're also making a show. So like you gotta kind of like dramatize it a little bit. So like I don't know. It's just like such a sticky, like touchy way, like thing to maneuver through. So with that being said, like this is this show, this series, Dallas, the actors, like everything is under such a like microscope of scrutiny, right? Because
Mhm.
this is a I mean, this is a beloved thing, right? That means a lot to a lot of people, right? This is
Sacred.
like the foundations of our faith, right? Our savior. You're telling
Mhm.
a story of Jesus, right? God.
You're
Um
playing with fire. Is what you're
yes.
doing.
So like this
Mhm.
needs to be treated with like the utmost reverence and like um yeah, so it's gonna. I mean, people are just gonna scrutinize the crap out of it because it's very important to a lot of people. Um, with that being said, I don't think like I think there might have been one or two things that I didn't like agree with, uh, like theologically throughout the entire series so far, which I think is pretty good because there's a lot of people out there that have argued and threw fits about many more things. Um, but I think what people need to keep in mind, again, this is going to be the last disclaimer because there's only one more episode, but this is not a replacement for the Bible. This is merely a tool to put in the tool belt to help bring context and relatability.
Mhm.
Nobody should watch The Chosen and use that as a supplement for actually reading the Bible.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So you read the Bible, you have a relationship with Jesus, and you work out your stuff in those two lanes, right? And then the chosen is just there to kind of assist in whatever way it can. But like ultimately, it's the same thing as like when you go to a church and you're listening to a preacher preach. Like you take what the preacher is telling you, you verify and check it against the word of God, right? And that's how you filter out things, right? So do that when you're watching The Chosen. That's my TED Talk. Thank you for coming. Let's get into episode 7. Unless you have any final points there.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. Everything you said is spot on. Like you can't just count on the show. You can't just count on every, and another thing is like, you need community as well. So like, and that's where you plug into a church, you find a pastor, you find that type of thing. You need to, you can't just, like if you just sat there and read your Bible every day, like that's still not enough, and I don't mean it like in the terms of like in the eyes of God enough. That's not what I mean. I mean, for you, like, like I was thinking about the commandments, love God above all else. Right. And then like you love your neighbor as yourself. Right. So like, obviously I don't want to take that out of context, but it is like you love God, you worship, you do that type of thing, you learn, but you also have to, it's like there's this horizontal, right? I think is the way churches usually describe it, the vertical loving God, the horizontal loving, right? And it's like there is still this like you need to get plugged in that way, and you need to, it's not just, you can't just sit there every night and that's it. Like, you know what I mean? You go to church, you're involved in things, you do things, and that's important, just as important.
Well, I mean, like, what's it say? Iron sharpens iron, right? You need that community to help, build and encourage each other up.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like, the Bible is your fact checking. Like, I'm not even limiting it to, well, I said that really weird. I'm not even limiting this to a show or a movie. Like, I mean, even your pastors, like we're just people, right? We can misspeak, or I don't know, have our own thoughts. So like, I mean, I'm just telling you, anything you should, fact check. If something makes you feel weird, like, okay, what's the scripture say about that?
Yeah. But even with that, I don't mean to cut you off, but like, so then you got to think, okay, so now I have this scripture and it's like, okay, so why was it written? Who was it written to? When was it written? Like, in what context was it written? Like, you have to understand the context too, and that's been my hardest part, even learning in seminary and in these parts. Is like, okay, I read it and it's like instantaneously I want to like take it to apply to my life, apply to this modern understanding. And it's like, no, James, shut up, stop. And it's like, you have to just sit in it for a little bit and try to think about like, who was this written to? What is the intent of it? What did the writer have intended by this? And so that's also important too. So like, if you don't understand a certain passage of the Bible, you may have to venture off out of the Bible, and you may have to find out like, what year was this? Who are the people that were around it? What was the territory? Like, and that's where it's this like forever long, deep dive into like, the rabbit hole, and it's so cool. And so that's when, I don't know. It's just, it's fun. You just do it. Just do it. Just do all the things. Go to church.
Just do it.
No, don't take other people's word for it solely. Like, think about it. You're my last disclaimer is that, you're meant to love the God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. Right. So what is the last one is? You got to think. It's not just like your blind faith running, like he's telling you to love your God by thinking too. Right. You know what I mean? Like that you have to think through things. So yeah, that's all. That's my disclaimer. I guess we can probably just jump into today's episode, and we are 30 minutes in.
Yeah. That 30 minutes that we could just release that as episode 6.5.
Yeah. 6A. No, I think it's good to mention it because I think we've touched on that stuff before, but just to kind of remind people, and hey, maybe you'll have just maybe the thing that we're kind of teasing right now, maybe next week when you hear what we're actually going to do, you might get pretty
Hey, I don't
excited,
know.
and
Maybe.
it might actually,
I don't know.
so
Could be cool.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
So, this week's episode, Ears to Hear. All right, Mike, read the plagiarized
All right.
short.
You ready? Buckle up. It's a long one. Jesus and the disciples take a dangerous journey to the Decapolis.
That's it.
Yep.
Okay. Oh my goodness. All right. Let's
Yeah, I just do everything I can to make this podcast as short as possible, James. You know that by now.
yeah, absolutely. We're good at making it short. All right. So we'll begin episode. Let's see. Um it is, what festival is this? It's a holiday, but I can't remember.
I was gonna ask you the same thing. I'm not sure. It is definitely a celebration of sorts. Everyone's partying it up here. Our boy Jairus, uh, Jairus. How did we say it?
Jairus.
Jairus. That's right. He's in the house going through what seems to be a traditional story. With his family. They go out on the roof, and all the families around are also gathered together celebrating. People are in the streets playing instruments. We go to John and Big James, their house with Zebedee. Oh, I'm calling him Zeb now. I forgot about that. And Zeb's going through a similar story. He even sings his, which he's a good singer. I was enjoying that. But yeah, they're celebrating something, and by the looks of it, I'm assuming you're Googling it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I'm on the wrong rabbit hole. So what led me to it is because they don't explicitly say, and he's telling a story about Esther, Esther,
Mm-hmm.
and so I don't know if 13th day, and on the 14th they rested. So I think this is Purim. Survival of the Jews who, in the 5th century BC, were marked for death by their Persian rulers. So I believe Persia was after. Either way, yeah, we could just continue on, but I think it's yeah. So I think Babylon had, Egypt, or not Egypt, Israel, and then you went into Persian. I think Persia took over after it. So I yeah, I think I don't know this festival. Usually I'm like, I have a pretty basic understanding of the holidays, and this one I don't.
You're fired.
I am fired.
So we'll be looking for a new co-host here. I'm just kidding.
No, but usually they have like some sort of like, hey, even if it's like some like dorky like random statement between a guy that's
some
like
good old exposition.
Yeah,
Don't you just love this festival of the Passover we're celebrating right now, John?
Exactly. And so they didn't do that this time. Right. No, I think it's to commemorate Purim, which is to commemorate yeah.
But the main takeaway here is Jairus's son is while they're out on the roof, he's imitating something, and Jairus is like, "What the heck are you doing, dude?" Because he's getting ready to. He raises up his glass over his head and looks like he's about to throw it, and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And he looks over and who is it over there on the other roof? None but Simon Peter, uh, having a meltdown and throwing a giant jar to the ground, shattering it. And then we get credits. But yeah, I'd say to help ease the burden of time, instead of going like play by play, the main gist here, we have Andrew and Philip coming back from their second trip to the Decapolis. Of course, it's been 2 weeks, so I can't remember if it was last episode or the episode before. They got word that their trip in the 2x2 missions didn't end well in the Decapolis. It kind of started a societal uproar over there. So they went back to try to ease things over, and it also didn't go well again. So they're coming back to tell Jesus and get Jesus over there because he can fix everything. So Phil, I think in this episode we see Philip in a state that we haven't seen him yet in the show. He's usually our confident,
Yeah, he's
um,
spiraling.
like, he's the disciple who's been there before. He's been with John the Baptist for a while, so he kind of gets what's happening here. But in this episode, he's not that solid disciple that we've come to know.
Yeah, no, he is well, it just shows that you're never really that solid, are you? You know what I
You're
mean?
right.
Like,
Even the most sturdy of us like have our moments, right?
mhm.
Um,
So
yeah,
did we ever discuss what Decapolis actually is? I don't know if we
I
did.
don't think so. Isn't it kind
So
of like a big melting pot of a region? Like I'm
yeah, it
assuming
is.
the
So
Deca
it's
is like a play on 10 something. Is that
mhm.
right?
Wait, what?
Like Decapolis,
Yeah.
Deca
So
10.
it's 10 cities, right? And so um that whole region before Rome, you had Hellenization occurring. It's like that Greek kind of culture kind of being
Mm,
implemented into a lot of other societies and stuff. And so after Romans took over, there was still Hellenization occurring throughout there. And so all around this area, you have Hellenized cities in different areas that still have that kind of older Hellenized culture. So these are 10 Hellenistic cultures or cities, so that are a part of the Roman Empire. So
yeah.
does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they're
So
all found throughout Palestine.
and we got Romans, we got Jews, we got uh Gentiles, you
Greeks.
got the Greek culture, like you said, mixing with the Roman culture, mixing with the Jewish culture, and then these knuckleheads go in and they're like, guess what? The Messiah is here, and he is the truth. And it doesn't really land well.
Yeah. I mean, I would think Gentiles. I mean, I think that just means any of
Anyone
them.
who's not a Jew,
Yeah,
really.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Um, but there were kind of some like funny moments in this episode. Judas is cracking jokes here when Philip and Andrew make it back and they kind of explain what's going on. Um, but what they said this time that made things worse, they used the parable of the banquet, which do you want to take them through that, just like an abridged version of the parable, if you can recall off the top of your head?
yeah, let me just find this real quick. Um, I actually don't. This was one of the ones I did not feel like I have gone over this parable
Mm-hmm.
um too much. So let me bring it. Do you know the what is it? The parable of the just
The
seeing it in front of
banquet.
me.
Yeah. So essentially,
Yeah, there
Jesus
it
tells a
is.
parable of you got it?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So basically, he's talking about this banquet. There's this great banquet inviting all these different guests, and so he's inviting all these people, but then they began to like make excuses first. You know, I just bought a field. I'm just kind of glancing through it,
Yeah.
but I must go and see. Excuse me, like so. There's all these people kind of making excuses of why they can't come to
Gotta
the
wash my hair.
yeah, or yeah, exactly. Um, so the owner becomes angry and it says, "Go out quickly in the streets and alleys and bring the poor and the crippled and the blind and lame." And
Mhm.
so servant says, you know, you, you, uh, it's been done, but there's still room. So then the master says, "Go and to the roads and country lanes and tell them that my house must be full," right? And
Mhm.
so he invites them. So what they tend to it seems like what the people kind of understood from that and what they thought that they were just like being invited because it was like it's like everyone else got invited first. um but I don't know. I'm trying. What the show is implying here is that when they tell this parable, it's like here's these people that are well off. I'm inviting them first, right?
Mhm.
They can come or not. Most of them didn't decide, and it's almost like because they're angry, he invites the poor, the crippled, and then now you have the people that are on the outskirts to have them come in, and they're even below
Mhm.
the people that are. So it's like there's this. I feel like what they're implying is there's this hierarchy here, and they're not understanding it correctly. Is that what the
Yeah.
show is? Okay, and they're
So
just like,
what I'm understanding here is, so if we look at again who the Jews thought the Messiah was coming for, right?
mhm,
The Jewish people are the chosen ones, right? So
yeah,
they think God, like, that God real essentially is only for them, right?
mhm, yes,
So in this parable, the person putting on the party is God, right? And
mhm,
he invites
the Jews,
his guests, being the Jews.
mhm,
Some come, some don't. They make excuses. So God gets mad, and he's like, "All right, whatever. Well, I'll take the lowest of you, right? The crippled, the sick, the lame, the blind, the deaf, blah blah blah. We'll bring them in. Okay. Well, the table's still not full. I need to fill my house. So then the people on the highways and the hedges, or the roads and the country lanes or whatever, like, that represents the any Gentile, right?
mhm,
And so what happened in the show, um, the Jews are mad because the parable is inviting Gentiles to be a part of this, right? The Gentiles are mad because they're like, "Hey, what the heck? Like, why'd we get invited last? Like, why are we being like, we were invited after the lame? Like, we're lower than the lowest of society here? Like, what's the deal?" Um, and there was one other thing that they said in the show, but essentially, everyone's mad because of everyone being included, and then the the spot in the hierarchy of society in which those people represent, right? So essentially, they go tell this parable, and it's like dumping gasoline on the fire already that's already burning. Um, and yeah, they're kind of in a tizzy about it. And it's funny because everyone that they tell, they're like, "Oh yeah, that probably didn't go over well."
Yeah, because I would say that the intent of that is not for them. They feel like that parable, if you really read it and you think about it, like it's intended to almost sharply hit the like Pharisees.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because they're the ones that God, I mean, if you look at that, they're the ones that God is angry with in that point, right? These people that
Yep.
are who have been invited, that have been supposedly walking kind of with him the whole time, and now that he is here, they're not even they're not even coming to sit at dinner with him.
Right.
And so I don't know. Yeah, this is actually one I have not really. I've wrestled with a decent amount of parables, but this is one I haven't really like fully wrestled with. So we're kind of wrestling with it as we go right now. You know?
Yeah.
um, I guess that's the not that is the difficult part of. Usually I have a little bit more time when I watch the episode too, when but since
Yeah.
we just watched it yesterday, and that lacks a little bit of time. But no, um,
So the way Judas breaks it down here, he says, like, all right, so tell me if I have this right. The Jews understood you to mean that Jesus was calling the Gentiles. The Gentiles thought you're calling them second class. And then the
yep,
conservatives who live by Jeremiah would have heard you saying the original guests who didn't want to go to the banquet would be missing the party altogether.
yeah,
So checking the box of
of,
ticking
of
off everybody
every
there.
person. Yep. And that shows you that like who it was intended for, because out of all those people, like if you think about it, it one of them is correctly intended towards them,
Mhm.
right? You know what I mean? One of those people should be angry. And that's the intent of, because it like the truth kind of hurts kind of thing. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
like it was intended to kind of, bring this to their attention, and the rest of them, it wasn't really meant to be in that. It's almost like saying it at that point is saying it out of context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
So,
sure. And let's just stick with the Decapolis arc. Because I mean, the episode does end on that, but it's not like a huge cliffhanger or anything.
well,
Well, I
yeah,
mean, it is, but like there are other important things that we can talk about throughout the episode too. But while we're on this, for the sake of continuity, let's just continue on. Um, the next time it comes up, honestly, is pretty deep in the episode. I mean, we're at like 42 minutes in the episode here. But essentially, Andrew and Philip, they're meeting with the whole party here in Jesus, and they're telling him like, yeah, we used the parable of the banquet, and Jesus like, ah, yeah, bet that didn't go over well. And they're like, yeah, it didn't. So he's like, all right, well, we'll head out there tomorrow or whatever. And I thought it was kind of funny because like they're comparing like their arsenal of parables, like we were gonna do the wheat and the tares, but we decided to go with the banquet, and
yeah,
everyone's like, "Oh yeah, I wouldn't have done the wheat and the tares. I don't even understand that one."
yeah.
It's just so funny. I love it. But yeah, afterwards, Jesus is like, hey, sometimes I think he says something along the lines of like, sometimes when you lift heavy things, like you drop it, like it's all right, man. Like I get it, you guys were trying, but maybe the banquet parable, maybe not the best to whip out in the Decapolis.
Hmm.
Um, but the big takeaway from this scene is what happens after this little meeting here. Jesus pulls John aside and he's like, listen, I'm going to need you to stay here and It's the theme of this episode, apparently, is people not taking things well, because John does not take this well at all. He kind of gets a little upset that he's essentially being asked to stay behind while the group goes to Decapolis, because he needs to wait for Peter, who's going through some things.
Some changes.
Yes. And yeah, what did you think of John here and his
Yeah, I mean, you always get that kind of like, I'm the beloved kind of thing. And so, and I always got this, like, I don't know where I got it from either. I almost had this, like, I've always had this idea that John and Peter, like, did not get along. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know if it's like, I know when I first started, came over to my faith here, I did a lot of like reading of the Gospels and Acts and different things, and one of them being like wrestling with just different. I felt so relatable to Peter, hot-headed, like I know you guys hear me on a podcast, but like, I can overreact. I can spiral just how Peter does.
You should hear him when we're done recording.
Oh yeah, no,
I get anything wrong.
Stop. Yeah, we usually have a very serious talk after every podcast. No, so I don't know where I got this, but I feel like maybe it's because like John's like, I'm the beloved, but then Peter's like the rock,
right?
And like you get this like idea that like
a little tension.
They were both competing for the right hand of Jesus,
right?
And like, as that kind of like,
because wasn't it John that's like asked who's gonna sit at the right hand, like, can it be me or whatever? Was it John that asked that? Somebody did. I would put money on being John, because gambling's totally like a Christ-like thing to do. I would put money that it was John. But then you have Peter throughout the Gospels being like, well, they even reference it in here, like, I'll go to the ends of the earth for you. Like, I'll never abandon you. I'll be by your side. I'll go with you. Like when Jesus is talking about what's going to happen to him.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could see where you come up with that, where they're just kind of like,
and I think
not maliciously, but like one-upping each other throughout the Gospels of like,
yeah, and I think too in Acts, if I recall correctly, John and Peter are venturing together. And maybe that's where it came from. I have to go back and think. I think, yeah, because I think there's a healing that they do at the temple. I think they go to a temple, and the guy is like, it's the magician that's like, hey, can I give you some coin for this like power that you have? And like that, I believe it's been a while since I've read Acts, but I got to remember that part. But yeah, I don't know why. I just envision them not getting along pretty well, and it just tension, like you said, just being like that, like number one thing.
Was Peter still alive when John wrote his gospel? Because like, I want to imagine Peter reading John's gospel and be like,
well,
can you believe this guy? He's just like referring
Peter
to himself as the one who Jesus loved. Like, can you get a load of this guy?
So historically, what they believe to be the first gospel written is Mark. It's very direct. And if you look, there's the synoptic gospels, which is Mark, Matthew, and Luke. Those three, if you line them up, you can see that Luke and Matthew draw a lot from they tell a lot of the same stories. These three, they're called the Synoptic Gospels. And if you look at
Mhm.
John's like so far out from all of these that like, you
Yeah.
know, there's just it's just a lot different. So, but I don't know where I think John may be thought of. I haven't gotten that far here, but I think John might have been considered one of the last.
Mm.
But I could be wrong with that. Luke might have
Can you imagine that though? Like Peter reading John's gospel and be like, "Get a load of this guy."
I don't know if Peter. Maybe he could read. I don't know if I don't know. I don't know if he was like, you know, the most literate person. I don't know how that like. It's. I don't think that's just like this common thing. You know. I don't
Mhm.
know.
Yeah. So we get through here. John's upset, right?
Yeah, John would have been is considered to be one of the last
Hmm.
ones to be written.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So you know what? We'll pause here and then we'll go through because we
Yeah.
can talk about John and Peter leading up to the end of the episode because
Mhm.
that's how it ends. So where do you want to go next?
Yeah. I mean, we could just take a quick trip down. Well, we've already talked about Decapolis. Already done
Little
that.
side note: Thomas is back. Big sad. Rama's dad didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. So there's update on Thomas and Rama.
I didn't get that. Where was?
That happens right after
How did I miss?
uh Peter, Andrew, and Judas talking about the disaster in the Decapolis. Wow, dude! Oh, that would have been a great name for this episode.
What?
The disaster in the Decapolis.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. That's like the intent.
Yeah, the intensity,
Intensity.
intense
Intensity.
city. Yeah, you could use that one, but you can't use disaster in Decapolis. Come on, guys. Come on.
Oh man.
But yeah, update on Rama
Yep.
Watch 2023. She's still in her hometown with her father, who did not grant Thomas her hand in marriage. So big
Yeah.
sad there.
Just need to up the dowry.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Um.
They're still talking about, you know, Jesus is at the talking with John's dad. Can't think of his name.
Zeb.
Zeb, yeah, Zeb. About you know, the field and all that stuff, probably telling some parables of different trees. No.
Wonder if he's
So
the wheat and the tear.
all right, let's just get this over with, dude. Let's
All right.
do it.
Which one?
Just do it.
Okay, hold on.
Just do it.
Hold on. I'm ready. I misclicked, but there you go.
Very not, you know, climactic. Yeah, so we are
Shout out Ben from Dragoon Effect in Discord. This segment is for you.
Yes. Oh yeah, he listen, yep. So we got Shmuel. Shmuel's back. He is just still digging deep, man. Digging deep. So he's interrogating a very old man about
got one of those
trying to
emails
get,
about a prince, you know, needing like 10,000 shekels or whatever.
So yeah, no, trying to basically buy a report here, an inquiry that he can send to the, you know, his leaders, and yeah. Oh man,
This
oh
poor guy
man, oh, man.
gets duped by someone going by the name of Jesus, right? You're too old to fight in the Messiah's army. If you donate some money, you know, that'll be good enough. So Shmuel, of course, hears something about Jesus, and he's like, "Tell me,
Yep.
the son of who?" And he's like, "I don't know."
He's like, Jesus
This
is like
whole
a common
interaction
name.
is
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah. So Shmuel is just,
Did he have any What did he say? Like,
He just looks so
any
sad.
loyal
No, he had
followers?
nothing. So really,
Yeah,
that added nothing to the story.
absolutely nothing. Just
Like
just to
we
let
could
us
have
know
gone
Shmuel's
without.
still out there.
Yeah, he is just still. So
Thankfully, it
so
was only like a 2-minute scene at most, maybe less.
yeah, and we have our boy. Oh my goodness, why can't I remember his name? You know it. The CIA agent.
Oh, Atticus. Yeah,
Atticus, yeah, my goodness, why am I
love
so
that
bad
guy.
with names tonight? Yeah, Atticus, he's here and he's I don't even I don't even know what they were he was trying to get what info? Is that what I remember? Like oh Yanni. Yanni.
Yeah,
They're
he's
trying
trying to go
to
ahead.
make his way to the leaders that are against Jesus, right?
Yeah,
Is
he's
that
still digging into the whole Jesus thing for
mhm.
Pilate.
But he, instead of Romans that he's digging with Jewish leaders,
Yes.
Pharisees. So, yeah, that happened. We don't ever have to go into the other part with that.
No.
Yeah. So, um, so that leaves us. We might as well just
Yeah.
talk
There's
about. There's two.
three storylines going on here left we need to talk about. Matthew, which I thought this thing was really cool.
Yeah. So let's just jump into that
Let's go.
since that doesn't really relate to anything
Yeah, little
else.
side story.
So Matthew, it shows a flashback, and Matthew is working at he's working the booth.
Mhm.
And he had Gaius sitting there, which I am excited to get into his because yeah, I know
Say,
you're just
nailed it.
come on, get out of
Just
here.
saying, nailed
Just
it.
stop. All right. Well, so
I said that last night while Becca and I
I
were watching
I
it, and
almost
she's like,
texted
"Well, yeah,
you.
pretty obvious, don't you think?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, it wasn't when I said it like a
Yeah, you're
season
right.
and a
You're
half
right.
ago." Okay.
You're right. When you first brought it up, I would say the second time you brought it up, we were getting close to it being like, uh, like
Yeah.
something's yeah. But when you first brought it up, I'll give you that. We have proof. It's somewhere on,
Yeah,
we
Beck,
somewhere in the 50,000 hours of recording, so you can dig back into it.
get
So we got
get Shmuel on the case.
yeah, right. So we got Matthew here. He's working the old booth. He's got Gaius standing guard like normal, and an older man kind of slowly walks up and he's kind of like, "Hey, man, you don't know me, but I know I'm in that book." Essentially, I'm just
Yeah.
seriously briefly paraphrasing this
Yeah, I mean,
terribly,
they're just missing a
but
few words, but it's
yeah,
pretty
just a
accurate.
few words. But so he's like, "Hey, I'm in that book." And so Matthew starts looking up name, and he's like, "Oh, you are like extremely delinquent." And he's like, "Oh, wait, like you have the biggest debt in Capernaum."
Yeah.
Like you owe the most. And he's like, "Yep, I do." He's like, I bought all the debt of all of my family
Mhm.
and put it onto me. And guess what? That's it. I'm
Yeah.
old. And
Turning
so
myself in.
I'm turning myself in. That's it. And I think what it implied there is the guy knows he's going to die soon. And it's not even that he's older, like he knows something's wrong. It's like what I kind of picked up from how he was saying it. But so Matthew's kind of like pleading with him, like, "Well, no, we can figure this out. We can figure out how to." And he's just kind of like, he is so happy, he's content. He's just
Mhm.
so content. He's like, "Actually, um, I got like, you think I'm gonna like last in like a work camp? Like I can't, like
Right.
this is it." And
Yeah.
um, so he says, "I do actually have one more thing of value." And Matthew's like, "Great, dude. Like,
Yeah, let's
let's
sell it.
do this. Let's
Come on.
sell it. Like, I can put it, he's speaking in terms of like, I can put it up against the price of the,
Mhm.
of what your debt is. And we can counter, and he's like, "No, like, and so he hands him, what he hands him is, he says, "A gift for you." And he gifts him, prayer beads.
Yeah.
And what he says is that these actually, date back to the Exodus. And
Mhm.
so they've been carried on in his family, back,
Which, by the way, he had
generation to
mentioned
generation.
that he is from the tribe of Benjamin,
Mhm.
one of
Benjamin.
yeah.
Yeah. Benjamin is so if you have Jacob, right? Jacob
Mhm.
was, you have my goodness, Abraham, and then his son Isaac, and then Isaac's son Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons. That's the 12 tribes
Judah.
of yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And well, 12 tribes of Israel.
Yeah,
Judah
right.
is one
Yes,
of
yes,
the,
yes.
yeah. So two of those children, two of those 12 are from what he describes as the wife that he loved the most, Rachel, which if you remember, so Jacob married, he worked, for his uncle
7
Laban
years.
7 years for Rachel, and
Got
when
tricked.
7 years he got tricked by Laban, giving Leah, and then Leah, he he married, he said, okay, well, I'll work 7 more for Rachel as well. And when he finally gets Rachel, um, Rachel's actually not able to have children, the one that he loved, but Leah was. And so later on, Rachel was able to have children. She had Joseph and Benjamin. And Benjamin is actually, when you get to the story of Joseph, when in Egypt, when he's Pharaoh, he's actually calling when they all go to plead to Joseph for being fed because there was a large famine, he calls for Benjamin. And so, and Jacob's like, don't give me, that's the only last child I have, because he didn't know Joseph was alive yet. So basically, Benjamin. All right, we'll just give you why we went on that rant, but that was exciting. I just love Jacob's story and all that. So, but Benjamin is one of the two that was
important player.
Jacob's beloved children. So yeah, he's from the tribe of Benjamin, and so he has prayer beads dating all the way back to the Exodus, and he just gives them to him. And so this whole time, and what sparked this is that early on in the episode, Mary, because his memories, implying this is like him thinking about his, when this actually happened. But Mary was moving something in his house and knocked over this box or whatever, and there inside were these prayer beads, and she brings it up to Matthew. Matthew gets upset, and then we go into this, and so I have the story here, and so he's trying to figure out later on, just to kind of end this here, the kind of older guy looks at the guard, and he puts out his arms like, arrest me, and Gaius looks at him like, dude,
like, that's not how it works, bro.
just go, we'll be there for you at some point, and just go. And so yeah, and so Matthew's trying to figure it out. He goes back to Mary, and it's like, hey, Mary, like, I'm sorry, shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have flipped out on you, I'm sorry. And he's basically like, he's like, I just don't understand it. And she's like, well, it had nothing to do with the beads. He was giving you his faith. Like, this is what I have for you. You should have. And so it's just, it's cool to see. It's just pure redemption with this. Watching Matthew walk on, because what we go on to later is Matthew is you're supposed to take these prayer beads and put it on as like tassels down at the bottom of your garment. And so just watching him from what he was before, kind of embracing his heritage and the people that he wronged and living amongst them again. It's just pure redemption. I loved watching that. That was a cool story. What'd you think of it?
Yeah, no. So yeah, there's a lot. But Thaddeus does a nice job of explaining the importance of these tassels. It's like the significance goes all the way down to like how many like twists and knots are in these threads, like represents the numbers of the word
600. There's 600, and
because there's
the number,
like 613 laws in the law,
and then there's 13 beads. So 613 laws of
and he explains the significance of where they're attached to the under robe, or I forget what they call it, but the tunic under their tunic.
Long johns.
The long johns. But essentially, it's Matthew's like, oh, it's because now you walk around surrounded by the Torah, the words of God, right? And he's like, see, you get it. So that was awesome. Also, just like, it's just a beautiful allegory, right, of what Jesus does for us, right? So that you have this old man coming up. He's like, taken on all the debt and penalties of his children and his family, and is essentially sacrificing himself because, like you said, he knows for whatever reason his days are numbered. He says as much. And he's sacrificing himself so that the debt ends there, right? And his family can live free of the Roman oppression, at least in that sense. So that was just really beautiful. Because Matthew's even like, isn't like sacrifice, like essentially killing yourself against our laws. And he's like, yeah, but technically I'm not going to be the one driving the sword through. He's like, there's nothing wrong with
I'm not the one falling on my sword,
he's
how he described it.
But I thought that the whole symbolism there is really cool. He does give us his name. His name is Matthew, which I think is interesting because if you go back in the Bible, that Matthew's name is actually Levi. It is changed to Matthew. So I don't know if the show will do something with like, maybe that's he is called Matthew already to this point, so that whole theory goes out the window, but maybe it's just a nice little nod to that. But yeah, you're right. Essentially, this man has seen Matthew at the booth for however long this Matthew's been in the booth, and he's cheating, robbing his own people, right? And like you said, these tassels are more than like an item, right? It's a symbol of restoring Matthew's faith and bringing him back into his culture, right? And into his walk with God. And it takes Matthew a minute to like realize it, and then through the conversation with Mary to like fully realize it. And it is so cool, like you said, just seeing Matthew, like he wants to attach the tassels before Jesus gets back, right? So he can be like, look, like I'm learning, I'm changing, like I'm growing. Which I thought was really cool.
I did too, but I also thought it was like this excitement. Like he just wants to like, not even like almost like that. It's like he just wants to like, it just, I just looked up. So the Hebrew meaning of Levi is attached or joining. That's what it typically means. And if you look at the Matthew's obviously an English language name. Mattiyahu. I don't know. I don't have it phonetically spelled in front of me, but I tried. And so, deal with it. But it means gift of Yahweh. So that's what Matthew means. So I always try to look up the words as much as I can.
Yeah. That's interesting because that's kind of what that scene is symbolizing, right? Both like literally he's attaching those tassels, but like those tassels are a gift from Yahweh, who literally is, I feel like this man is a divine like intervention to Matthew here in this episode. So yeah, it's just really cool. I really, really enjoyed this scene. It was really good. And it did take up some time, but I like it.
Yeah, it was like one of those, I was like, man, this has been a long scene here. Now, it was definitely good. And so we get back to, let's jump into it. Let's jump into our boy. I mean, it's the last arc, actually, that
old Pete
on here. Old Pete. Stinky Pete. So, what is that? Toy Story? Stinky Pete?
Maybe. Yeah. I have to phone our Disney expert friend Ryan Ford. Ask him.
I love Toy Story so much.
Oh,
so I actually just watched it with Nova the other day. So, yeah, that happened. Nova's my daughter.
Yes.
So, all right. Did we ever really mention in the beginning of the episode what Peter was doing?
No, just breaking the jar.
Okay, we did mention that?
Yeah.
Okay. He's just pacing back and forth and he breaks a giant
going through something, obviously. as we
Yeah.
know. We're aware.
Okay, cool. So we don't really see him till later on, and what we do see is him kind of just walking almost like he's drunk or something, but he's not. He's just in a new strange place to him, and where he
Yeah.
is the Roman quarters of Capernaum. And so at
Mhm.
this point it's probably, I think like it's like a common ground for this. And I actually really didn't think about much of the separation between them. Like this should have been, I feel like, um assumed. I should have just known this, but I didn't, and I haven't really thought much about it. But where they would live as opposed to where the Jewish people would live. And so I don't know why I didn't process the fact
Yeah.
that it's probably like a gated community.
Segregation,
It
baby.
is. Well, yeah, it's a gated community of like, where they can kind of freely walk around, and it's policed by Roman soldiers in a way, and that the only people really are getting in are Roman citizens, or maybe even Roman people just in general. But so here Peter, a Jew, is walking um through this area, this Roman quarter, and he's noticed by I would say an ancient policeman. And
Yeah.
so he stops him, and here comes our boy Gaius, and is like, he good old Primy, and
Yep.
he saves the day and says, "Come with me. I'm going to question him," and takes him into his home.
House. Yeah.
Yeah, his house, and he pulls him in. He's like, "What possessed you to? What did you think you were doing? You're going to get arrested," and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And this is where it is, man. Let's just hear it. I'll let you take over. You can gloat all you want. Let's hear it all, man.
Hey,
Let's let's
I've
do it.
no gloating here, because I'm not sure if it's something truly to be proud of, watching so many shows and movies,
No,
being
you nailed it pretty good. And
up on.
no, but you have to understand the context and remember the story to even like assume that this is who it is. So
True,
let's
true.
hear it. What do we walk
Uh,
in? First
yeah,
person that walks in.
so here, they're in the room, Gaius and Peter talking, why he's there, and who comes in?
The wife.
Gaius's wife and son.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, okay, he's got his family. We knew that, right? He already had that conversation here. But the interesting thing is his wife asks, "Oh, are you the Jewish doctor?" And Peter's like, "What the heck are you talking about?" And yeah, so that happened. She's like, "Guys said there's like some Jewish doctor that out there that might be able to do something." And Gaius is like, hey, just can you get him one of my robes? I don't want him to be seen as we like try to get out of here. Like, I don't want him to get in any more trouble. So she goes off, and while this is happening, Peter's like, that gif of like the lady like staring off, and you have all the like math equations like popping up in the background. If that's Peter right now, he's like, wait a second, Jewish doctor, this guy's seeing Jesus heal all the people. He told her about Jesus. So while that's happening, his son's, his son's like, "Do you know the Jewish doctor? Can he help Ivo?" And Gaius introduces Peter to what's his name?
The son.
Something Roman. It starts with an M. He's like, "Yeah, this is my son." And first off, I just love when his wife comes back with the robe and like won't hand it to him, and Guy's like,
It's like, dude.
"Dear, Jewishness is not contagious, okay?" Like he
Yes.
literally says that. And I love it. Um, but yeah, we see they look off into the room, and what's in this room? I don't know. A sick boy in the bed. The son of the servant, right?
Mhm.
That guys had told Peter about. So yes, we're seeing my bold prediction come to pass here. Gaius is going to be the centurion who asked Jesus to heal his servant's son. And Jesus is like, I don't even need to come because it's going to happen. Or like Gaius is like, I don't even need you to come because when I give my soldiers orders, like I know they're going to carry him out, and like that whole story. So yeah, I was excited. I did pat myself on the back, but
I almost
that's
texted
neither
you
here
right
nor
when that was happening. Like, oh man.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right, dude. Yeah. And so we do learn one little snippet. Might as well just finish that. It was after
Yeah, I wanted to
Matthew's.
ask you about this, if this has some, like, historical and biblical merit, or if this was just added in for drama purposes.
I mean, well, essentially, I'll just explain it and then we'll go into. Basically, they're sitting there and he's like, the boy's been sick almost a month. He's getting worse, and basically, Peter's like, hey, well, why didn't you just go to a doctor? And he's like, well, you saw the color of his skin. Like it's normal Roman doctors aren't going to look at him the same way,
Mhm.
and so, and he gets into it and he's like, well, this is actually my son.
Yeah. By the
Essentially. So,
way,
by the way, I
may or may not have fathered this child.
slept with the servant
Yeah.
and fathered this child. And so, and, what did he say? For Roman men is more common thing, and Peter's like, well, actually, just all men. It's a
Yeah.
common theme. And he's like, this is more accepted in your culture than ours,
Yeah.
and that's the way he puts it. Like all men, not all men, but you know what I mean. It's just that doesn't matter what culture, and it's common. But yeah. So it's his illegitimate child. Is that how you would say that? I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah.
really know if that's the right context of it.
I
But
would
yeah,
I
so
think.
it's his child. So I don't know if that's the right way you'd say it. I don't really like that. Doesn't sound good.
He says, basically, guys, like, yeah, it's getting to the point where I can no longer pretend that he's not my son. And his wife knows, and he knows that she knows, and it's like this awkward thing that they just don't talk about. And like, that's how the whole thing kind of came up. Peter's like, hey, I know a thing or two about having awkward tension with wives. So spill the beans, guys. And that's how this whole thing comes to pass. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
So
I'm
we'll see.
glad that. I mean, I like Gaius, and seeing
Mhm.
how far he's come so far up to this point. I mean, he's still not like fully like in yet, but just the fact that he keeps lingering around the fringes of all of the miracles in Capernaum, right? Like he's witnessing these things. He's kind of what's his name? The guy that's in charge of Gaius. Forget his name. Quintus.
Quintus,
Quintus.
yeah.
He's kind of like defying Quintus's orders with the way he treats the Jews. So his heart is softening to the Jewish people. And now he's telling his wife about the Jewish doctor, right? Who's Jesus, who he's seen do all these healings. So it's like you can slowly see him like turning, like in his repentance, like he's slow motion turning around and start getting ready to walk the other way, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that leads us to what and what's up with this scene, man. So it just kind of fast forward. It's right after John realizes he have to stick because Peter at this whole time is Peter's just been gone. As we
Mhm.
talked about that, he's just wandering around, looking up in space, and just kind of, he's been gone. No one's really seen him. So that's when Jesus tells John. Now we're back at this point, like, hey, you need to wait for Peter. Peter's going to be back, and when he comes, you guys can all head this way. But
Important thing that we forgot to mention in that
what?
conversation, Jesus says, yeah, this whole thing in the Decapolis, like it all hinges on Peter. So like you need to wait for him and you need to bring him. So
Mm-hmm.
that was an important thing that we kind of glossed over. But yeah, the whole thing, Jesus is like, it's all dependent on Peter. So we got to get him there. That's another thing that kind of makes John angry with this whole situation.
Why don't I understand? Okay, well, I'll think about that for the next episode and try to understand that. I don't know why I'm not. I know what I have a
I
feeling.
don't
I
know
know it's
either.
next, but I don't know what. I mean, we all know what's next,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You know the scene, and so, so yeah, so it fast forward a few seconds, and it's like that. I just can't sometimes. These scenes, just I don't know if you have it out in here, but like I wish I could share my volume with you guys. I don't know if that's possible. I need to
Yeah.
figure out how to do that. How do I do that?
Down at the bottom, there's a thing that says present, like you shared your screen earlier before we
Uh-huh.
recorded. When you do that, when you click on the screen that you want, there's a check box at the bottom that says share audio. If you click that, we'll be able to hear whatever you're sharing too, as well as see it. And I have the hiccups, so yeah, fun times here.
Yeah. So this part right here, just this music, it's like goes.
The slow motion.
The slow motion, and it just
Yes.
turns, and they're all walking, wind blowing,
Dude,
and
Becca and I actually like
I laugh.
joked around about this
I
part.
just I can't like, I don't know. It's just
Yes, we joked around about that. Like she said something, and I was like, "Cue the fans," because gotta have the
Yeah.
hair and the robes blowing in the wind.
so, just the music. So I almost left
yeah.
studio. All right.
Oh.
Don't do that. So not the first time today I almost did that. So yeah, it was just too funny. But yeah, I had to share that. Usually I don't share my screen with this, but that's just the way that they kind of turn that corner. So they're on their way to Decapolis, and Andrew is ironically the calm and collected one, but angry, stern, and Philip is just ready to spiral. So yeah, Peter gets back to just kind of at the same time, kind of just back and forth. Peter gets back to, and he's like, "Where's everyone at?" And they're like, "Actually, they're in Decapolis on their way now." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And
Thanks for the heads up.
yeah, I didn't know about the trip and blah blah blah, and so Zeb is just kind of like, like, "Hey, you're disconnected right now, man. You have no clue what's going on," and that's when I love it, because Peter's like, "You rebuke me? Are you like rebuking me right now? Are you like, like what?" And he's like, "Don't play with me, kid." Like, what is the actual words he says? But he's like, "Don't play games with me, kid." Actually, Slum and I, it basically saying like, don't pull that on me. Like, you're disconnected. I called you out on this, like, to be honest with you, to be real with you, and you're trying to like reflect, deflect this away, like, and you're not, and like, you're something going on, bro, and you need to fix it.
Well, like if there's anyone out there not familiar with the term rebuking, because that's kind of like a heavily like Christianized term, right? But it just means an express sharp disapproval or criticism of someone because of their behavior or actions. So,
are you calling me out?
Yeah.
Are you criticizing me? Yeah. So
don't play games with me, kid. He literally says that.
Yeah, literally, because it's good, because he's just like, like, which I like it, because he's almost like being like a father figure in all of this. Like, he's calling him out in a way that he needs to, and so so that's good. So yeah, no, we're here. We are at the disaster in Decapolis, as you put it. We're gonna rename this episode.
Do you want to talk about, because there's a conversation between John and Peter on the road up to what's happening, and then of course there's what's happening.
Oh yeah.
Which one do you want to do first?
Well, let's do John, and let's just continue on since we were just with John, and I forgot about that. So John and Peter are there. They're walking in there, and they're like, and so John kind of just throws the thing out there of like, basically like, you have a wife, right? Like you have what we don't have, essentially, and Peter's like, I. That's what. Okay, so I think that's what John's kind of doing, kind of like, hey, like I'm sitting here waiting around for you, and I could be with Jesus right now, like who I like, and you have a wife, you have these things, like I don't have this, like almost like saying like he doesn't have this like companionship, and Jesus is his companionship here. And
Mhm.
here is Peter, the one that has it all, is has Jesus's companionship half the time, and wife and family and all this stuff, and so it's almost like he's comparing it here, and that's when Peter's like, oh, like, he just kind of just shuts down, and
Literally.
literally just looking down and
He
shuts
turned the
down.
off switch and he just stops walking head down like,
Literally, the batteries fell out of
yeah. I wonder if
you
that
know,
was the
him.
directing there. It's like, hey, as soon as he brings up marriage, pretend the battery died.
I liked this though. I liked this because it drew attention to, I think, a common thing that Peter's angry,
Mhm.
and he's angry with Jesus. Like he's angry, or just to kind of just say he's angry with God, right? I mean, that's
Mhm.
what we can just literally say at this point. And it's rightfully so. And I think that he's looking around, he's like watching all these people being healed, he's watching this, he's being told that, like, when he goes away, like, it's almost like maybe imply, I don't know where he kind of got that, but that, like, at the very least, the family that he's leaving behind while he goes out is going to be safe. And,
Yeah.
he's very angry because they lost their child. And so,
And we were told here that it was more serious than that, that like
yeah,
Eden almost died. So he
even
almost lost
almost,
both of them.
and that
She
didn't
may
it
not
say
be able to, it
correct?
might have been so disastrous that she might not be able to have children going
Mhm.
forward. So
Yep.
it was a big deal. I mean, it
Yep.
already was a big deal, but it's like a really big deal.
And I think I like these kind of scenes because it's like, I don't know. I think people are like, I don't know, maybe even like maybe new Christians or old Christians, whatever you want to. But like, I feel like a lot of people are like, well, like, you can't be angry with God, like, like that kind of
No,
thing. And it's like, well, really?
I mean, look
I
at some
don't,
of
I
the
don't,
Psalms.
yeah,
there,
I
there are some
very,
not
I,
not pleased.
I think it's actually not biblical to say like that you built so it's healthier to build up your
Yeah,
anger,
pent up
pent
all
up
of
all
your
of your
feelings and
angry, and
emotions.
just and
Yeah.
and you know what, and just bury it deep inside and act like God doesn't recognize that you're pissed at him. Like,
Mhm.
what do you mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't, I think that is, it's almost insulting in my book to God, the fact that like you're gonna act like you're not mad but you are, and like deep, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. I don't know.
Well, I think they nail this though,
Hmm.
and let me explain why. Because uh, a big thing. Okay, so first off, John says, and it says throughout the New Testament, like Jesus said, this life
Hmm.
following me is not going to be easy. Like,
Bones will break, hearts will break.
yeah, like you're
Mhm.
gonna come up against it, but I'm gonna be with you, and now, and when I leave, like someone even better, the advocate is gonna be here with you. Like, we'll be here with you, but you're gonna go through some stuff in my name, right? um, and there's a big thing. Obviously, my only reference is the modern church because, well, I'm 35. I've. Only lived through the modern church. I'm not 70 and lived through past eras of the church, right? But a big thing that we see with our generation and like the mainstream church is everything is emotional. Everything is based on your emotions. Like I can't I can't believe God is who he says he is because right now I feel angry because this miscarriage. So because of my circumstance and what happened, I can't
Mhm.
believe God is who he says he is. What The Chosen nails and is very important, I think, for people to understand is like Peter says he's like,
Yep.
man, I wish I was paused at the right spot to get exactly what he says, but he's like, I'm mad at Jesus. Like I trusted Jesus. I'm mad at Jesus, but it doesn't change what I think
I
about
still
him.
believe
Like
who he
I
is, and I
believe
know
he's
what. Yeah.
exactly who he is. He is the Lord. He is the Messiah. Like that doesn't change anything. I'm just ticked off right now because what happened sucked.
Mhm.
Essentially, which I think is very important because it's very easy to see your surroundings, right, and see and read about the God that we serve and that we are faithful to. Um, you know, while Jesus promises that not all the time, life you're going to come up against it sometimes. But
Mhm.
on the other hand, he also promises like life and life abundant and provision and health and love and blessing too, right? So like you're going to have both. But when you're going through those times and you're reading like, oh, he's the provider, he's my comfort, he's my joy, he's my strength, he's promising life and life abundant, and God is a faithful God. So anything that he says, like God cannot lie. So anything that he says, he will do. And I'm reading all these things, but here I am in my circumstance. Like my wife just had a miscarriage while I was gone on a mission trip serving God. She almost died, and thankfully she didn't, but we might not be able to have kids. Like in that situation, it'll be hard to not let that affect unless you're like really solid in your walk. Like going through something like that, it would be very hard to not let that affect your view
Mhm.
of God, right?
Yeah, and also I'm kind of getting this thing of like he's like it's almost like that protector of his immediate family, almost in this like, hey, like I'm okay with the fact that I might die, but like I kind
Not
of
them.
expected them to not be, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like I'm okay with me walking into fire, but not them, you know what I mean? And like that protector father kind of figure of like, you know what I mean? Like wanting, well, I mean, I guess it doesn't really father, but protector parent kind of
Mhm.
thing of like, protecting your family around you and doing whatever you can. And so, yeah, but also at the same time, I feel like what he's doing is very healthy, actually. Like you're angry, like, you don't go out and hurt people. Don't, do these like overreact, but like you gotta feel it. You gotta have to, I mean, anger doesn't mean that you lash out. You know what I mean? Like you can feel angry. It's what you do with your emotions, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like that's a very elementary kind of thing of like, like you feel them, you feel angry, you feel sad, but like
Yeah.
what do you do with those feelings? And
Yeah.
and yeah.
You got to get it out and then you got to not
You have
linger
to
on it.
yeah, exactly. You have to grieve and you have to actually get past these types of things. And
Yeah.
that's what he's doing right now. He's grieving in his own way. And I think even from the beginning, like at the beginning of the season, the series, you saw a Peter that's like freaking out and spiraling over everything. And like this, it's like the hard thing that comes along his way now. Like he's showing maturity. He's like, I'm walking away from this. Like I'm taking a break from everyone. And I need to. And even when Jesus is like, "Hey, you need to wait for Peter," like it's like he understands that. He knows it's not like he didn't seem like, "Where's Peter?" Like, no, it's kind of
Right.
like Peter's doing his thing right now because he needs to. And so I don't know. I thought it showed pretty good. I think they're staying true to his character in this, and like the development that we would see within Peter as a leader, within, being who he is and what we know him to do, know he does in the future, right? As a leader,
Mhm.
and like the rock, the foundation, the father of the church, essentially. And so yeah, I don't know. Um
Yeah.
Pretty
I
good though.
just look at it like co compare your relationship with Jesus with your spouse, or
Mhm.
like, or if you're not married, like a really good friend or a parent, right? Or
Yep.
someone you're extremely close with, right?
Mhm.
It's not good for that relationship to not be transparent in your communication. So, like, if you're
I'm not
upset with your
following.
wife, or if your wife
Oh,
is
okay.
upset with you, uh,
Oh, okay.
and you know something is going on, it is not healthy for your marriage to pretend like everything is perfectly okay and just continue to move on. Like, you gotta have that sometimes hard conversation of like,
Mhm.
"What's going on?" "Well, here's what's going on." "Okay, how do we move forward from this?" And,
Mhm.
like, you're supposed to have a relationship with Jesus, and
Yeah, no, that's good. It's a relationship.
require
Yeah. It requires that. Yeah. I like
sort
that.
of processing and communicating.
Mhm.
Um, but the key is to not let that like, knock you off of your foundation of, like, who God truly is.
Yeah. And when you do that, you think of Job, and Job's like, you know, kind of kind of questions God, I would say. Not in who he is, but like, I don't know. I just read through Job and it's pretty good. And God's eventually like, hey, like, let me show you. Were you
Huh.
there when I created it? It's just, it's a good thing. But like thinking that, Job losing everything, and kind of people telling him to like, you must have done something wrong to deserve this. And he's like, yeah, I don't know, but it's interesting to see. Yeah, it's a relationship though. You have to kind of, and that's what he's doing, right? Well, actually, I don't know if that's exactly what he's doing. He's still
We have yet to I mean, because
he
the episode
confronted
ends with him running up to the
the
crowd of what's
crowd.
going on,
Yep,
so I'm
and
sure we'll
that
see
leads
this
us.
continue to play
Yeah,
out.
so that leads us back to the Decapolis, and so
Yeah.
at the Decapolis is you have first off, I don't know his name. Um, Kind of reminds me of like, definitely reminds me of a Greek. Um, Reminds me of like I don't know how to describe it, but yeah. Um, Basically, I don't know his
He
name, but
it's the messenger from the previous episode that comes and sneaks into their room at night and tells them that they basically set a fire in the Decapolis. They need to come back and
oh
fix
yeah,
it.
that's why he looks so familiar, and he does look like that. Like, um, reminds me of a messenger. That's what it is. So he does kind of remind me. It's like the gospel, the good news.
Mhm.
Um, what that kind of indicates, I don't know if you know like what the good news means. Do you know like what that's from? So after like a battle, a Roman battle, what they would have is somebody from the battle would run back to town to tell
Mm.
them the good news, and that's like the messenger. And so that's
Oh.
that's kind of like what they were kind of symbolizing the gospel into, is like, here's this like this good news, like we've triumphed over, and so
Mhm.
that's what they're correlating that to, and that's what the
Nice.
the words are used.
Yeah, so this scene here is, straight up from Mark chapter 7, 31 through 37 here. We have the healing of the deaf man. So I got it pulled up, so I'll just read it here because it's, like, pretty head on. Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee, and into the region of Decapolis. There some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hand on him. After he took him aside, away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears. Then he spit and touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven with a deep sigh, said to him, Ephphatha? Ephphatha? I don't know. That's a tongue twister, no pun intended, which means be opened, which Jesus says both of those phrases in this scene. At this, the man's ears were open, his tongue was loose, and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone, but the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. He has done everything well, they said. He makes the deaf hear and the mute speak.
What verse was that again?
Mark 7:31 through 37.
Okay.
When this scene started to happen, I looked at Beck. Me and Beck we were on something when we were watching this because we were just cracking jokes left and right. I was like, "Oh, I wonder if he's gonna. Is this the wet willy healing?" He's like, sticks him in the ears, gives him a little wet willy, and be opened. But no, it was a cool scene. What'd you think about it?
Yeah, it was good. No, I mean it's you know what's weird is I was thinking about this when it happened. Do you think, at this point, this reminds me of so many scenes that have already happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it's how many more, they're all going to be very similar. Like, that he's healing all these people. How normal do you think this became?
Well, I was about to say that because the disciples are just kind of like,
yep, there it is.
Jesus
He did it again.
Yeah.
Yep. But even so, like, you can't really paint these scenes much different than they already are. And it's like already, you only seen it, what, I don't know, 8 times or I don't know, whatever, since season 1, like at this like scene happening, like already it's become so normalized that like the idea of it's like almost like you're like, all right, cool, I got this scene, like, but like the reality is like, we just healed somebody. Like that's, that's not just like a thing you just kind of say, okay, like that's just normal. And so that's very, that was interesting to me, the kind of just my own perspective on it from watching a scene like this, happening, from a different angle, but a different person, but the same scene essentially.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you still have the disciples like cracking smiles to each other while it's happening,
nodding,
as they're like panning. But man, I think like you're right, because it's a lot of similar miracles, right? But the beauty in it, I think, for me, what still continues to get me is like seeing the recipient's reaction. Like the guy who is healed in this scene just does a great job acting this out. Because as soon as he says be opened, right, and it happens, he can hear the birds singing, right? Jesus comments, he's like, oh yeah, don't be afraid, those are the birds singing. And Big James is even like, I don't even hear that. Like, so it's cool. Like immediately he's just shocked, and he like whips his head around because he's hearing for the very first time, right? Or at least the very first time in a very long time. And then he like makes a noise, right? Kind of starts to talk a little bit, and then that startles him. He's like, oh, like I could hear my own voice. And then he's like says his son's name. I'm assuming it's his son. Maybe they say it's his son, but he says his son's name, and then he's like trying to enunciate it, right? And he's like, is that right? And he's like, oh yeah, it's perfect. Like just seeing it all unfold from his perspective is just, it still gets me, because it's like, it's such a beautiful thing to see somebody come out of something that's been oppressing them, for lack of a better word.
Yep. And so at that point you have this guy on horseback come riding up, and he's the town he
oh my gosh, have you ever seen Anchorman?
Yes.
Did this not remind you of the scene in the alley where all the news channels, and they have their like
oh my goodness,
fight?
I didn't think about that until now. Yes.
It literally just popped into my head, but like, continue. Sorry.
So the
I
guy
can't
on
unsee it now.
horseback, yeah, I can't either. So the guy comes up on horseback and he's like the town healer, and uh, basically is kind of like, I told you guys not to, not to come around these parts anymore, and and you got um you know who you basically talk. What is, was that a Hebrew? I think it was a Jewish guy that comes up, right? Like, because he's like,
Yeah,
you have the
he
Greek over here, um
teaching all of
corrupting
our
our,
people their philosophies and
yep,
stuff.
and
Yeah.
yes, and so corrupting our people here, and then Jesus is like, well, like, why, you're healing him, well, why, what, like, you didn't give this guy enough attention because he didn't have enough money, like, so what do you, like, what do you, I don't know, basically saying like, what do you, would you speak for him? I don't know, because yeah, basically what you have here is you have a Greek person that is speaking for a Jew
Yeah.
who is deaf, right? But Jesus is like, you, a Jew, a healer, right? Healer, quote unquote healer,
Yeah.
are not helping this Jew because he doesn't have enough money for you. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it's like, so would you speak for him? And that's what he's saying. It's like, this Greek over here is doing more for this person that is in desperation than you, and you're his
Mhm.
own even people. You know what I mean? So that's what's happening here. And
Yeah.
so you have just this confliction of like, I don't know. Right? Is that like,
Yeah, no, no,
maybe,
no. You're exactly right. Because
okay.
yeah, while that's happening, Andrew and Philip run up the hill and look over, and there's like tons of people just camped out. And while that's happening, another group comes up from behind the party, and start making comments. Oh, the Galileans return! Ha ha ha! This time in droves. And Matthew, being Matthew's, like, oh, that word describes animals in flocks, and they're like, yeah, yeah, we get it. But they're what are they? The Sycophanians, something like that.
Seraphi
Man,
Seraphiotians.
I'm glad they made these words so easy. But yeah, so they're coming. They confront the party here, asking if this is Jesus of Nazareth, and they're basically like, "Oh, well, you are who you say you
Seraphonicians.
are." There you go.
Seraphonicians.
Like, good job out of you. And they're like, "Well, if you're who you say you are, why don't you show us, perform some miracle, a sign to show us you are who you say you are?" And while all that's happening, we get another party coming over behind.
No,
Are
this
you
is, I can't
seeing
unsee it.
the Anchorman
I
parallels
cannot
here?
unsee the Anchorman parallel right here.
Dallas was
I,
like, "All right, guys, have you seen Anchorman? That's how this is gonna happen. As long as we don't have a trident soaring through the air somewhere." Shout out, if you know, you
yeah.
know. But yeah, so this
Nabateans.
lady comes up. Who are these?
Nabateans.
There you go.
I'm
And
literally just saying that confidently, but I think I'm wrong.
hey, I believe you. She comes up and she's like, "Oh, are these all your followers? What are there, 9? I have more children." Like, what kind of army is this?
Yeah.
And all this is happening, and then we have like a I'm just on it with all these random references, but we have a very Walking Dead like reference here, as we see the droves of people walking through the field towards the party
Yes.
here. And at this point, Peter and Andrew, or not Peter, Peter and Peter. Peter and John are finally arriving here to the group at this point, and
yeah. Oh, go
go
on.
ahead.
Sorry. No,
Okay,
you go on.
I was just gonna say at the end of Peter and John's conversation, they're like, oh, they hear the crowd and they're like, oh, we must be close or whatever, and they look up and they see, and John's like, hey, by the way, Jesus said this whole thing depends on you, so
Yeah,
take that as you will. And then Peter runs off
Yeah.
towards the group. So
And
we'll
it
see.
looks like, I don't know, I'm not good at math here. Actually, I'm pretty good at math. But um, I would say there's probably looks like there's about 5,000 men
Well,
coming
maybe. Yeah.
and plus
Probably some
women
others,
and
but
children.
yeah, I
Yeah.
saw about at least 5,000 men for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. On the dot, actually, I counted it as
Mhm.
about
Yeah.
5,000 men coming. So that should allude to what the next scene is probably going to be.
Oh, yes,
Um,
yes.
so yeah, no, and that's really the end right there. So I thought it was a good episode. It was just, it was just basic for me. It wasn't like this huge, I don't know. I think this time kind of walking through it, talking through it made it more, I don't know. I guess the depth that some of the scenes and things kind of really hits me more when you're kind of like slowly going through it and kind of stewing in
Yeah.
it a little bit
Yeah.
more. But as it kind of played out on the screen, I was like, all right, like,
Yeah.
um, but
I It was, set up for the finale,
yeah. So how many
really.
scrolls would you give it?
5.5 to 6 out of 7
Yeah,
scrolls.
I'd say five. Five
Yeah,
scrolls.
we've gone we've veered away from the scroll system, not intentionally, but I'm
Mhm.
glad when you remember,
Yeah,
things.
every couple episodes, but
Yeah, so I'm excited to see what happens here in the finale. By the way, these episodes 7 and 8, they were in theaters over the weekend,
Mhm.
which I saw a report that on Thursday alone, which was the opening uh, showings, they brought in $1.6 million
It's insane.
just on Thursday. So yeah, that's pretty awesome. Uh, Yeah, so spoiler alert, episode 8, the finale, we're going to see the feeding of the 5,000.
Mhm.
So that'll be cool to see. Interested to see what happens with Peter and his mental state. Of course, I was super glad to get the confirmation of my bold prediction, the first one of our podcast series.
Yep.
So that was fun. But yeah, I would say not like the most stellar episode out of the season so far, but it was still pretty good. It's just setting up for the finale. Let's be real. Let's be
Yep.
honest.
Yep.
Um, but yeah,
So
anything you want to get off your chest before we get out of here?
no, man. I just, I'm excited to, stick around for our next episode. We're gonna give you an actual. Um, we're actually gonna tell you what we're
Yeah, what
got
we're
up our
working on here.
sleeve. So what we're working on, and so
Yep, that'll be
um,
fun. We'll
super
make
excited.
our announcement, let you know some more details about the next project.
Mhm.
Um, of course, it's the finale of season 3, so we'll have a break from the chosen
I just did a
companion
bunch of
series.
work on my website too, thenerdybible.com. So kind
Very
of
cool.
updating that, getting it ready for, you know, um, more content and stuff that's coming on there that's actually like, educational. That's not just kind of like setting up and stuff. So it's
There you
exciting.
go.
A lot of things happening. So pretty
That's awesome.
excited.
Um, yeah, I'm excited to. It's typically with our companion series, what we like to do, much like the first episode of a season. Um, on the last episode of the season, we like to make predictions about what we might see in the coming season. Now, of
Mhm.
course, we're cheating because we know what happens in this story, but we don't know what they will choose to show out of the Gospels in these
Mhm.
seasons. So I'm excited to get into that in next week's episode. But yes, stay tuned. Next week will be the season 3 finale, and check out thenerdybible.com. Check out all those cool updates James is making over there. You can head over to showboysmedia.com. We are about to embark on our most ambitious podcasting project to date. In March, we are doing a March Madness style tournament for basically figuring out the ultimate streaming service original series. So we've picked 64 shows from that are exclusive to a streaming platform. We've split those 64 shows into 4 divisions that each host of Showboys hand selected in a fantasy football style draft. And then of those shows, the matchups in the bracket were determined by their overall rating, doing a traditional seeding format. Our first episode is March 2nd, where we're going to go through all 32 matchups of round 1 of the tournament. It's going to be
4 hours.
It's going to be so fun. We have a poll up right now on our website on the front page there that you can take vote for which show you would pick to move on. The Chosen is a part of the tournament, which I'm very excited about. And also, fun fact, it is actually the highest rated show of all 64 shows that are in the tournament. And this is going up against like House of the Dragon, Ozark, Rings of Power, like all these huge, huge shows. The Chosen was the highest rated out of all 64 shows. Isn't that crazy?
Mm-hmm.
Like, by a long shot. And the thing that is also crazy, not to keep dragging on, but I found this very interesting when we were compiling all the data for this. It has like 20 or 30,000 reviews on IMDb, which is a mega ton of reviews. And on IMDb, it's got like a 9.5 or 9 something, high 9. But anyways, all that being said, check out our websites. Thank you. Subscribe, like, rate, review, comment, join our Discords. Let us know what you thought. We'll see you next week for the season 3 finale. Goodbye.
Bye.